Yeah, here we go. So business agility, agile transformation. So we're going to have a look at a bit. The main thing I'm really going to be looking at is sort of like my experience over the last 26 years or so, helping organisations transform to agile. Really, what my practical experience is. We're going to have a look at some models as well. There are lots of different models we can think about, and in the previous 11 business agility webinars, we've been looking at lots and lots of models. Off the top of the head, we've probably looked at somewhere between 25, 35 models, different models. So yes, business agility, agile transformation. For those of you who've been on these sessions before, apologies again, because I always go through this right at the beginning. But for those of you who are new, just to introduce myself, my name's Pete Measy. I'm the RadTAC chairman and founder. RadTAC is a worldwide agile transformation training people provision organization. We're not huge, but we're also not small. So I'll come on a bit later on to talk about the geographies that we're in. But yeah, so I founded this organization, this company back in '98. I used to be the CEO of RadTAC, but I sort of semi-retired away from that role probably about 3 years ago. So now what I do is really work as a transformation consultant, trainer, do these webinars, all sorts of good stuff like that. So founded RadTAC in '98. So RadTAC's been around a fair while. I started in the IT industry in about 1983. I used to be an IT expert, technical practices, all that sort of good stuff. I wouldn't say I am now. I'd say I'm more experienced in business than I am in IT. Obviously, starting up a business and growing it to the size that RadTAC is now, yeah, it's really the business experience. So really, I'm an expert in business agility nowadays, rather than just sort of like agile for information technology. So worldwide specialist in agile, lean, Kanban, working on transformations since '94, and actually worked on business transformations before that, but been working on agile transformations since '94. Certified in all sorts of stuff that I won't bore you with, but things like certified Scrum trainer, all that sort of good stuff. I used to be a director of the non-profit organisation, the DSTM Consortium, which was one of the agile frameworks. That has since morphed into the Agile Business Consortium, who some of you might be aware of. Good stuff in the Agile Business Consortium. And I am actually a fellow of the Agile Business Consortium. I was the lead author and editor of the Agile Foundations book for the British Computer Society, which has sold very well. If you look at the numbers, that's sold in the top 50 of Agile books. So that sold very well. And I used to be an ex-adjunct professor of Agile Project Management at Hull University. That's not a real professor, by the way. That's a lecturer, but they used to call us adjunct professors when we were lecturers. So that's just a bit of introduction of myself. So this is the 12th in the Business Agility webinar series. If anybody is interested in previous webinars, then they are all on the RadTAC YouTube channel. So just go into YouTube, search for RadTAC, and you'll see all the previous 11 webinars, all of which are focused on business agility, agile leadership, things like that. Today's webinar is really going to be looking at agile transformation. So reminding ourselves of a few things we've had a look at before and having a look at a lot of new stuff. And also, as I say, just to reiterate, really focusing on my practical experience over the last, whatever it is, 30 years. So with that in mind, we're going to sort of structure have a quick look at the need for business agility, then have a look at what the difference is between agile business transformation and business agility. So I think they're two separate things. Have a look at some major agile transformation models. There's loads of these, so we're not going to look at all of them, obviously. How to initiate and achieve brilliant agile transformation across the business. Again, that's a big area that we're not going to be able to go into in depth in an hour, but we'll certainly look at some key areas. And then the last bit, which I would suggest is probably the key bit, key lessons I've learned during the last 26 years of doing this sort of stuff. So yeah, why business agility? Again, in the earlier webinars, I went into this a lot more. In webinar 1 and 2, for example, I went into this quite a lot. Why do businesses need to be agile nowadays, especially in the context of the 4th industrial revolution that's happening? If you want to have a look at the 4th industrial revolution, I would suggest have a look at the videos from the World Economic Forum. They will give you a good overview of what the 4th industrial revolution is, but basically it's moving into things like artificial intelligence, machine learning, remote working, all these sorts of things. So not planning to go into a great amount of detail here because I don't want to bore the people who've been here before. I don't want to spend lots of time doing this because I've talked about it before. bottom line, why do we need agility in business? Well, it's what's called a VUCA world. You'll hear people in the agile world talk about VUCA, and what they mean is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. So certainly my business experience over the last 23, 24 years or whatever it is, running a business. 20 years ago, business was unrecognizable to the way it is today. It was a lot less complex, a hell of a lot less volatile, a hell of a lot less ambiguous. So, what's happened with the digital revolution that we've been going through, the globalization revolution we've been going through, the fourth industrial revolution that we're going through, the COVID nightmare that we're going through, etc., etc., etc. It is a very, very volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world. Therefore, traditional approaches to business, maybe waterfall sort of approaches, analyze everything, design everything, build everything, all this sort of stuff, isn't really going to work very well in that VUCA world. It's not designed for that VUCA world. Agile is very much designed for the VUCA world. So, it's really about successful business into the future. I would actually suggest, got to have a Bob Dylan quote in every webinar. So the times aren't a changing, times are a changed. So there's a quote there from John Cotter, who I'll mention a little bit later on. This is a chap that I would definitely recommend you to have a read from a transformational perspective. You could almost consider this person to be the dude when it comes to transformation. Cotter has produced a number of landmark books. I suppose his main one came off the back of a white paper that he did for the Harvard Business Review in the late 90s. He was talking there about how things had changed so much by the late 90s and how we all needed to think about how to lead change. Now, Cotter has an 8-step change process, which when you look at it from a helicopter view, might look a bit traditional. You do this step followed by that step followed by that step. Well, actually, Cotter's made it very clear over the last, 10 years, I'd say, that, we need to do these steps, but the steps need to occur in a very iterative and incremental style of delivery. So, even the main gurus are talking about business agility nowadays. So the point Cotter is making here is that, things have changed. They're not changing, they've changed. And the one thing you can pretty well guarantee that, that change is only going to get faster. It's not going to get slower anytime soon. And, arguably, if there is any positive that's come out of this COVID nightmare, if there is, the speed that we're moving into the fourth industrial revolution now, and, the change to working practices has really been turbocharged by that. So, it pushes us even more into the world where we need business agility. And, we all recognize this one. Somebody sitting in an office even a year ago, oh, digital transformation, don't worry about that. It'll be years before we need to think about that. Bang, COVID-19. Whoop, bit of a problem. So, these things, by the way, if you want to read more about things like COVID-19, these are termed black swans by a guy called Taleb, T-A-L-E-B. I'd highly recommend read his book, Black Swan Farming. The idea of a black swan is that statistically, most swans are white, obviously. Every now and again, a black swan turns up, and we need to make sure that we can deal with the black swans as they turn up, the COVID-19s and other things like this. Obviously, if your organization is very agile and very flexible, you will find it a lot easier to deal with those sorts of things than a business that is very traditional and very rigid. So, agile business transformation versus business agility. Let's just have a look at this. So this is something that I defined a fair few years ago now, but I've mentioned it in previous webinars, so I'm not planning to go through it in detail. But the way I see things is business agility, lots of definitions for that, but one way to define it is delivering fit-for-purpose outcomes constantly and continuously improving, or delivering value continuously and constantly. So that's business agility. That's where we want to be, the ability for the business to deliver fit-for-purpose outcomes constantly and continuously improving to our customers. Agile transformation is about basically transforming from a traditional business operating model to a business agility operating model. That would typically include descaling the business. And one of the webinars, I think it was webinar 9 or 10, if I remember rightly, I looked specifically at the scaling frameworks, all the different agile scaling frameworks out there, talked about their pros and cons. But I made the point in that webinar that scaling is really about descaling. It's really about removing complexity and making things simple. So, before you think about scaling anything, descale. So agile transformation is about transforming to that business agility model. And then once we have that business agility model, we continuously improve. So that's what I see the difference between these two areas. So we could consider this in a slightly different way. Looking at the left here, we have a pretty traditional J-curve. So the current state, productivity and performance will typically go down as we go through the learning curve, and then productivity, etc., will go up until we get to the desired state. Now, we might need to do that. That's sort of like your agile transformation. You are running a risk of a period of disruption, etc. However, the diagram I have here, the J-curve, if you have people who understand agile transformation, that impact will be significantly less. So basically, people who understand agile transformation, etc., what we're about basically is reducing that impact, so shallowing off that curve. So make sure that we do things in an effective way. So that might be your agile transformation. You need to do some work to get to the desired state to get to business agility. We'll see a little bit later on that I would recommend that's iterative and incremental, which de-risks it significantly. And then really business agility is more about doing what we've got on the bottom right there. So, we want to get small J-curves, very low risk J-curves. We want to continually improve. So a big feature of business agility is organizations that continually improve. It's a big sign to say, yes, this organization is focused around business agility. Fantastic. So that's what I perceive as the difference between the two. There are some very, very good people out there in the market who are saying there's no such thing as agile business transformation. Basically, it's all about business agility, and I can understand that. I can understand that argument. What they're saying is we should continuously improve. Yeah, I agree with that. But my experience is that we will need to do some sort of level of transformation to get to that state, to get to the point. If you look at a very traditional organization, they do things in really big ways, which is very, very risky. And sadly, most of their transformations fail. So we need to change that way of working in the organization. Then we need to continuously improve. So it's that key difference. Let's look at some agile transformation models. As I say, there are loads of these. We've looked at a fair few in previous webinars. Looked at quite a lot, just to remind ourselves of this sort of thing. Now, before I start into this area, as I was suggesting earlier, I'm going to get your input on things as well, rather than me just jabbering away for an hour. So this is the first thing. So on chat, I'd greatly appreciate it if you could identify, what transformation models have you used or do you like? And if you have references for them, that would be awesome, because that's going to help everybody else on this as well. So yes, if we can have a look in chat. So Jess, what models have you used? What do you like? So I'm just going to chat now. I don't know if we'll get any input on this one, because you might not have used any transformation models. I'll just give it a minute to see if anybody actually suggests anything, at which point it means I can have a drink. Now everybody's gone into quiet mode. Oh, there we are. Lean change from Value. Yeah, fantastic. Lean change, I would highly recommend. X-Scale, I'm not actually aware of, but sounds fantastic, and I will definitely have a look at it. So thanks, Haldor. X-Scale, interesting one. Leanchange.org, yeah, definitely. Some or all of you may be aware that one of the core foundations of business agility is indeed lean. So X-Scale, Peter Merrill, Merel. We've got a reference here. So yes, I would recommend having a look at that. Spotify model from Elaine. Yeah, it may not be a model designed for that, but I was in a company where they use Spotify model. Yeah, I would suggest Spotify model is one of the agile. It's one of the agile models. I'm sure you know this, Elaine, based on what you just said there on chat. But the key thing to understand about Spotify model is that was Spotify, I think I'm right in saying, in around 2007, 2008. Great stuff, really good. But they've evolved since then. They've moved forward since then. And it's arguable, how much of Spotify actually aligned to the Spotify model. However, it is a model. And it is a model I would recommend looking at, but just use it with a word of caution when you use it. So awesome, yeah, fantastic stuff raised there. So thanks very much to everybody for raising that stuff. Let's have a look at a few. I think that this is a quote I always like. George Box, a statistician. All models are wrong, but some of them are useful. So I find it sometimes what happens is you know, people like me, agile consultants, etc. Sometimes we go into what I would call agile wars. And what I mean by that is that, you know, we're always arguing that our model's the best model. And what I would suggest is that's a bit of a pointless thing. What it's about is delivering continuous value on a fit for purpose basis. You know, agile's about that, business agility, delivering continuous value on a fit for purpose basis. So it's not about whether I use framework X, Y, or Z or model A, B, or C. They are all useful, but we need to figure out for our organization, taking into account the real culture and the real way our organization works and our market is changing, what are we actually going to do? And that typically will be a mix of different models. So as I was saying previously, we've seen lots of models in webinars 1 through 11. We've seen culture models, we've seen agile framework models, we've seen power and influence models, we've seen measurement models, we've seen loads of different models, which hopefully if you look at those previous webinars, you know, you'll have a good foundation to think about your agile transformation. Let's just remind ourselves of a few. Whoops, it would help if I hit the right button. Yeah, this is John Cotter. This is actually a slide from SAFE, which stands for the Scaled Agile Framework, which is one of the Agile scaling frameworks. As I say, I looked at the scaling frameworks in, I think it's webinar 9 or 10, if you're interested in finding out more about SAFE under the scaling frameworks. Yep, Cotter talks about an 8-step transformation process, so I'd highly recommend have a look at Cotter's work. Number one, what Cotter says, establish a sense of urgency or remove complacency. What that means is some organizations, you know, they're world conquering organizations, they're absolutely fantastic, but they can become quite complacent and they don't realize that things are happening in the market because, you know, they're number one. What Cotter suggests is we need to remove that complacency and establish a sense of urgency. You know, sadly, there's been many organizations who've hit significant problems from being number one to dead. You know, BlackBerry, Nokia, Kodak. So the first thing we need to do in any transformation, certainly in agile transformation, is establish a sense of urgency and understand why are we doing this. Number two, create a powerful guiding coalition. So what SAFE, for example, talks about is what SAFE calls a LACE, which is a lean agile center of excellence to guide the transformation. Number three, develop the vision and strategy. Key things to understand here is that it's going to change. So don't try and develop the vision and strategy to be perfectly correct, because you'll never get something that's perfectly correct. Get something that's good enough that communicates our direction of travel, start communicating that, and then constantly re-communicate. So communicate the vision very, very clearly. That's about understanding your stakeholders, and we'll have a look at that a little bit later on. Empower employees for broad-based action. Yeah, definitely. We need to think about how we're going to get buy-in from people. You know, if all we ever do is broadcast and communicate, here's what we're doing, here's where the business will be going, we're never really going to get buy-in. We want employees to be empowered because empowerment equals speed. So a lot of the speed of change that we will be able to implement comes down to the level of understanding and empowerment of the people in the organization. Generate short-term wins, probably an obvious one. Agile transformation is iterative and incremental in the same way that business agility is iterative and incremental. So we need to be generating short-term wins. We need to be measuring those short-term wins, and we need to be constantly communicating those short-term wins so people can see that there is tangible, realistic benefit coming out of this. Number 7, consolidate gains and produce more wins. Yep, consolidate everything together, update our vision and strategy, re-communicate, think about the next short-term wins. And then the last one, which is absolutely essential, that I'll talk more about as we go through, anchor the new changes in the culture. So we can see there, we start by the sense of urgency, guiding coalition, get the vision, communicate, evolve everything, but we've got to make sure that we anchor these new approaches in the culture. Because if we don't change the culture, what we're doing will just bounce off the organization. So yeah, that's one, another model. Another model, design thinking. Yeah, good model to think about. So this is a RADTAC diagram here. What we're talking about here is our view on design thinking. So we've got discovery and delivery, and not surprisingly, you can see it's very iterative and incremental. So the idea is to evolve the product DNA, or in this case, the business DNA, by thinking about things like lean startup. Another great book I would suggest you should have a look at, Lean Startup, by a guy called Eric Ries, R-E-I-S-S, Eric Ries, Lean Startup. So in other words, start small, yeah, start in a lean way. Yeah, so go around that discovery fan belt or that discovery iterative cycle. That will inform our business development iterative cycle. Think about visual thinking models so people can very visually see what's going on, what the impact on the business is, the impact on the customer is, and basically keep evolving this round as we go forward. So this is a very good model to think about. We covered this in, I think it was webinars 8 and 9, if I remember rightly. We talked about innovation and creativity, and we talked about product-based thinking. And we did that with the awesome Stuart Young, who some of you may have heard of. He's a real leader in this area. So you can find out a lot more about that in that session. Ratak Key. This is what we use basically. Again, no great surprise. It's an iterative cycle. So the first thing we do is we need to have an understanding of where are we. So what is the current state of the organization? You know, what's happening in the market? Is this organization sinking really quick, or is it more an organization that needs to continually improve to get where they want to be in the future market? What's the current culture? Have we got a very traditional old school culture? Is it more of an agile culture? What are the key decide outcomes? Where do we want to be in a couple of weeks? Where do we want to be in 3 months? Where do we want to be in a year? So, you know, what direction are we going in? What's the roadmap to get there within a short iterative cycle? And then choose some pilots. So, you know, we don't want to try and change everything all at once. We're going to choose some pilots. This is what we'd have in our review stage, adapt stage. Consider all the different methods and frameworks. Consider what works for that organization based on the review that we've done. Create the agile operating model. So either for a part of the business or hopefully for the whole business. Identify measures and baselines. So we're going to use that for the continuous communication back. Then deliver, do whatever makes sense. That might be a portfolio of training, or more usually a portfolio of consulting, training, provision of talent to act as people in the organization who are exemplars of working in the way we want everyone to work, and then very visual communication of benefits. And then track, measure improvements, track the maturity, continuous communication, then back to review, back to adapt, deliver, track, review, adapt, deliver, track, review, adapt, deliver, track. So it's continuously evolving. So that's another model. This model is specifically for transformational change, similar to Kotter's, which is specifically for transformational change. Okay, fantastic. So let's think about a few ideas associated with great agile transformation. Now, you know, what we've been looking at really during webinars 111 through 1 to 11 are all great ideas for thinking about business agility and or agile transformation. You know, we talked about agile leadership a lot in webinars 3 through 7. And obviously leadership is going to be a key element of creating fantastic agile transformation. But let's just have a look at a few ideas here, and then we'll start to get on to sort of like what I've learned over the last 24 years, sort of key things I've learned over the last 24 years. So we'll look at a few ideas. Before we get here, just to remind ourselves, thinking about agile transformation, well, why can agile or any other transformation be difficult? So in your experience, what have you seen that has made any transformation from position A to position B difficult? So again, rather than me just talking away, if you could come up with some observations here, that would be absolutely awesome. So I'll just move this down and have a look at the chat if anybody's raising anything. So why can agile or any other transformation be difficult? Over to you. And again, it gives me an opportunity for a drink. David, yeah, people in business not buying into it, definitely. Elaine, yeah, similar thing, lack of buy from the top. Manoj, yeah, great stuff. Culture, people change. Andy, similar to the other two, lack of senior stakeholder buy-in, definitely. Shishrindu, people need to change behavior, defo. Jasbir, people are all different. One approach may not be suitable for all. Bajal, people that don't like change. Dina Paul, yeah, mindset, awesome. Yeah, awesome list. And by the way, I recognize a few of those names. Welcome back, those people who have been on previous webinars. So welcome back, folks. Yeah, Andy, company objectives may well be conflicting. Absolutely, that's a really important point to consider with change fatigue. In other words, you know, I remember, well, I'll name the organization because it was a long time ago, but about 28 years ago, I was working on a transformation of British Airways engineering. So this was changing the whole way that British Airways engineering worked 28 years ago. And I remember talking to the chap who was running that, great guy. But I said to him, you know, okay, so we're going to be thinking about transformation to a new way of doing engineering in British Airways. how many key objectives have we got? How many key things are we aiming for? They said 96. I said 96. You know, the key 96 key things we're aiming for. Yeah, 96. Now, I was pretty junior in those days. I still, still highlighted the fact that I thought that wasn't the best idea in the world. But, that created a huge amount of change fatigue and also a huge amount of confusion because, no human being is going to be able to take 96 key things on at the same time, and certainly no organization will. So we need to be very much thinking about, are our company objectives clear? Are we not creating a huge amount of noise by having far too many? And do they conflict with each other? So it's an excellent point from Andy there. Yeah, brilliant, great stuff. All right, so once again, awesome. Thank you very much. Some really great stuff there. So I'm just going to carry on with the slides. So yeah, great stuff. So just a few thoughts here about how we initiate and how we make sure agile transformation keeps driving forward. Again, going to give you a reference. A guy called Simon Sinek. I'm sure some of you will have heard of. Sinek's actually a marketing dude. He's not an agile expert. He's not a business transformation expert. He's a marketing and leadership expert. I would suggest, he's got a book called The Golden Circles, and he's also got a book called Start With Why. I would suggest both are worth reading, but specifically for what we're talking about here, Start With Why. So the point Sinek is making here is that what we need to do is before we get anywhere thinking about how we do stuff or what it is we do, we need to communicate why we're doing it. So he's talking about organizations like Apple, for example. They are very, very good. They don't talk about, for example, this is how Macs work, or they don't talk about here is what our Mac is. What they talk about is why you should buy into Apple. So that's the key point Sinek's making. If you want to sell any concept, you've got to get people to understand why are we thinking about implementing this concept, whether that be Apple's portfolio of products, whether that be using Zoom, whether that be doing an agile transformation, whatever it is, we should always start with why. So there's a very good short, about 7 or 8 minutes on YouTube. If you just type in Start With Why, Sinek, it'll come up, and I would recommend you have a look at that to get an understanding of really what I mean when I'm talking about start with why. Okay, let's keep driving forward then. Another thing you need to we need to get our heads around is what the environment is that we're operating within. So we start with why, communicate to people why we're doing this. We then obviously evolve that why message as we go forward. But we also need to understand the environment. Now, I would guess some of you or all of you will recognize this diagram. This is the Cynefin framework from the awesome Dave Snowden. So yeah, we need to understand our environment. Is it complicated? Is it chaotic? Is it complex, simple, or is it disorder? Because depending on where we are, we'd be using different sorts of practices. For example, if we're in the simple arena, we may just use best practice. We're going to do this all the time. This is recognized best practice. Everybody understands it. No great worries here. If we're in a complex arena, we really need to be emerging that best practice. So in other words, if your business is largely complex and not chaotic, complicated, or simple, then we need to be thinking about emerging what the business operating model is, continuously improving and continuously reflecting to the market. So it's about understanding what your environment is. My experience is in the vast majority of businesses, you're going to get all of those things: complexity, complication, disorder, chaos, and simplicity. But largely in businesses nowadays, I would say probably 25, 30 years ago, much of business was in simple. So in other words, we didn't get a huge amount of variability, so we could use best practice. I would say nowadays, the vast amount of business is in complex and complicated, and some of it's in chaos and disorder. The COVID-19 nightmare, it's pushed us into chaos and disorder in some arenas. So we need to understand the environment within which we're operating, and we need to make sure that which we are defining as a business operating model enables us to deal with those environments. So, agile business agility enables us to deal with all of those things, but it's really focused into complex, complicated, chaotic. Kanban or flow models are more to do with disorder and chaos. We also need to be focusing on selling the change. We need to make sure that we're selling the change. Transformation, like anything else, is something that people need to buy into. So we need to be able to explain why. There are some good figures on the market. One thing I would recommend you to have a look at is something called the Annual State of Agile Report. Again, you can get that off the internet. This is the 2021 that we're looking at here. So in essence, the way the annual state of Agile report works is you register for it. There's normally sort of 7,000 people register for it worldwide. You register for it. What then happens is you will be sent a questionnaire. You fill in the questionnaire, and then a couple of months afterwards, you will get the result. So the way that all of the 7,000 people who did the questionnaire, what they came up with. So this is one thing they normally have in the report. There's lots of different things to have in the report, but this is one benefits of adopting Agile. So we can see here, if we want to sell the change into the organization, we can say, well, looking at other organizations who are adopting Agile, this is what they experienced. And wow, there's some really big messages here. Ability to manage changing priorities in a complex world. 70% of organizations who are doing Agile said that got better. Delivery speed, time to market, 60% that got better. Wow. Team morale, 59% that got better. Woo, increased team, etc., etc. So some really good high-level market-based empirical evidence in this. So I would recommend have a look at this, because it's going to be essential that as we do the business transformation, we are continually selling it. So think about what's on the market. We also need to continually sell the change with proof. So we're going to be working iteratively and incrementally, always driving forward. It is essentially important to continuously communicate the advantages and the benefits that we're getting, so people can see that there is a reason for this, and especially the senior management can see that they're spending money on something that actually is giving us real, tangible, fantastic benefit. So I talked a lot about measurement in webinar 11, but we need to have a good balanced set of metrics and measurements that we can use to continually sell the transformation. Sadly, in most situations, I've interacted with many brilliant business transformation people over the last 24, 25 years, so fantastic people. The biggest mistake I've seen people make is they try and do a big bang transformation. So in other words, they say, well, I can't put anything live, and I'm not really going to communicate anything out, because I need to have something defined for the business that's perfect before I actually communicate anything. Because if it's not perfect, it will be lambasted and shot down. I try and give them a bit of guidance to say big bang's not the best idea in the world, and then 3 months or 6 months later, that transformation program gets cancelled because it hasn't actually delivered anything. What we need to do is get things delivered ASAP, because in a living, breathing business, we're not going to know whether our transformation is going the right direction unless we're getting feedback, and we've got to have tangible, provable evidence of the benefits this is giving to keep the continual buy-in. So essentially important, this is, keep it iterative and incremental. I've probably done that to death already. Everybody talks about this now, big bang business transformation. Please no, you are doomed to fail. I'll talk about this a bit later on. But, I don't think I'm sure I'm wrong, but I don't remember ever seeing a big bang transformation of any sort succeed anywhere near, the sorts of times and costs that the business thought it would align to. I've seen many continuous, business transformation to enable the business to be continuous, and then continuous improvement. So keep it iterative and incremental, the improvement as it goes forward. But you may well need, in fact, typically you do need to do some transformation to get there. Yeah. Change journey. So I'm going to talk about a couple of things related to the journey towards change and the frozen middle. So the point I'm making here is sometimes what happens is we'll implement the change in the people who are doing the job. Fantastic. They will generally get the idea pretty quick because they'll see the benefits. And we also communicate the benefits into what I've called here layer one, the senior management in the organization, so they will see those benefits. Your difficulty can be in the frozen middle. So the people who are the sort of like middle to senior level managers, you just need to be aware that there's going to be a lot of fiefdoms there, there's going to be lots of politics there, there's going to be lots of smokestacks there, and we will need to find a way to pragmatically bring those people with us. What we don't want is to have those people fighting against us, and I'll talk about that in a few minutes. I'll draw a diagram in a few minutes around that area. Okay, so the frozen middle, just be aware of that. Another thing to be aware of is when you're thinking about the size of business transformation, it's not the greatest idea to try and do everything all at once. The reason being is that you will start to drive a transformation, you'll be successful initially, you'll show some fantastic figures on the transformation, then all of a sudden everybody goes, holy crap, this is absolutely brilliant, you know, I've got to make sure that I'm agile because wow, look at the figures associated. Then everyone all tries to do it all at once. And what will happen is that will totally swamp your transformation team and it will totally swamp the business. So it becomes like a breaking wave. So your agile transformation gains great weight and credence, and then it goes into a wave and it then crashes. Now, once you've crashed your transformation once, you're going to find it really difficult. In other words, you know, what I mean by crash the transformation is we've just got far too much happening at the same time and it's all going different directions and it's just becoming a total dog's breakfast. Once you've crashed that transformation once, you're going to find it really difficult to reinitiate it. So we really do not want to big bang everything and try and do everything all at once because it will just run away. It'll run away with itself. Yeah. So breaking wave, we need to be aware of that. Change journey can be a long trek over time. Change, disruption and resistance. Well, disruption, we need a level of business disruption to drive change. You know, disruption causes change. But we don't want too much disruption that it totally causes everybody to be resistant, but we want enough disruption that it causes change to occur. And as I was saying, don't try and do it in a big bang way because you will cause far too much disruption and there'll be far too much resistance. Do it in small iterative cycles. So that's one way we could look at things. Another way we could look at things is sort of like the quick hike. You know, we sort of like try and do, oh, right, we're going to do everything all at once. Now, this might actually, in reality, this might be the thing that you have to do. You know, if you've looked at the culture of the business, you've looked at where the business is in relation to its market and its competitors, and, you know, it's blindingly obvious that this business is sinking, this might be the thing that you have to do. So, but if you do it, you really do need a huge buy-in to this, and you will need an extremely experienced transformation team to actually drive this sort of thing forward. So yes, the quick hike. Yeah, let's just have a quick look at a picture. I have drawn this picture in previous webinars, so I'm just going to go through it pretty quick. You know, really, where do we want to be? By the way, somebody put something on the Q&A that said fear of uncertainty. That's one of the big transformation blockers. Definitely agree. Definitely agree with that. Fear of uncertainty is a big blocker. So let's just have a quick look at how we might consider agile transformation, the best way to do it. Oops, daisy. So what we want to do is, here is our business. So here's our whole business, and within our business we have different elements of the business. So we might have a marketing team, maybe a sales team, perhaps. Maybe we've got a digital and IT team, admin team, maybe purchasing, etc., 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 etc. Yeah. Now, what can happen is sometimes transformation is just done within one area of the business. So maybe we transform the way we're working, whatever that is, just in digital IT, perhaps. The risk you're running there is those transformational changes become like antibodies in a body. And what will happen is the rest of the organization will basically act like white blood cells, and the rest of the organization will attack all the antibodies because they don't understand why it's happening, and it's just not the way we do things. Yeah. So it's a very high risk thing to do. And also, you're not actually focusing on the bottom line, which is the customer. You know, what we're about is delivering value to the customer in a flexible, very focused way. So we don't really want to be trying to change everything all at once because that's big bang and that's going to be, you know, huge risk. And we don't want to be changing in small parts of the business because that's going to be a significant risk as well. So what do? Well, what we do is we follow a key tenet of agile thinking. We do what's called vertical slicing. So what you would pick is a part of the business. So let's say this is a bank, maybe. And what we do is we focus on maybe, I don't know, home buying and mortgages, maybe, something like that. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be thinking of a value chain for home buying and mortgages to deliver value to the customer. What we're then going to do is we're going to implement business agility across that part of the business. So in other words, everybody's now working together. Everybody understands why we're doing it. we're focusing on it, we're measuring it, and we can measure the real value change down to the customer and get the customer's opinion. Once we've got that tangible factual evidence, we can then start to roll out to the next bit, the next bit, the next bit. And what we're looking for is a concept that's known as, and I think this is a RADTAC concept, although we may not have come up with this idea, I can't remember, but we call it viral change. What we want to have is that everybody's understanding the benefit they can see in the other part of the business. We don't want to change, we don't want a crashing change wave, so we need to control what's happening with the transformation, but we use the success of one part of the business to communicate out to the other parts of the business. So we create a change wave based on factual evidence, and what we're doing is we're doing small, incremental and iterative changes. Okay, fantastic. So let's have a think about people change. Yeah, this is something, analysis, 50 to 75% of transformation programs fail. That's from a book called Wired to Succeed, which we're going to look at in a minute. Is it Wired to Succeed? I can't remember the name of the book off the top of my head. Wired to Resist. There we go. Wired to Resist. So yeah, this is from there. So most transformations fail to launch. They don't launch effectively because typically they're trying to do too much all at the same time. They fail to scale. So in other words, you know, trying to do too much all at the same time, they lose control, and then the crashing change wave happens, and then fail to sustain. Typically what's happened there is they haven't taken into account the culture of the organization and anchoring the change in the culture, as Cotter would talk about. So Wired to Resist talks about this. I would suggest to have a look at this. Either have a look at webinar 6, where I talked in this in more detail, or have a look at the book. Different areas of the human brain are all focused into different things, like the, I can never pronounce this, the amygdala, that's probably wrong. And it's the, I'm freaking out, there's too much going on at the time. Then endorenal cortex, oh, I'm lost, what the hell's going on here? The basal ganglia, oh, I don't know what to do, I don't know what to do, etc., etc., etc. The habanula is very important for Agile, actually. I can't mess up. You know, innovation and creativity is about making mistakes, about messing up, but do it in a low risk way, and, you know, drive forward from there. So yeah, people-based change. We need to make sure that our change is focused on people. I would strongly suggest you create an ordered transformation backlog. So in the same way, if you were developing a product, you would have a backlog of what you need to do. Create a community of change. So the LACE, yeah, Lean Agile Community of Excellence, and create that. And in relation to our LACE, we're going to have an ordered transformation backlog. So we know what we're going to do first, second, third, etc. You need to think about how you're going to put that into an order. There's two ideas here for the sorts of, you know, sorts of graphs you could think about. So the top left one, for example, is going to look at what's the amount of disruption to the daily work, as opposed to how long is it likely to get you, how long will it take people to get used to this change. Obviously, red is probably going to be low priority because that's a lot of effort over a long time. Green would probably be a high priority because that's little effort and it's over quickly, and we can get that implemented. Yeah. So think about creating an ordered transformation backlog. That's essential, and then you need to be thinking about how to do it. ClabNet version 1. So this is the annual State of Agile report. This figure came out of the 2019 State of Agile report. Top barrier to Agile success is organizational culture. So in other words, the culture of the organization is at odds with the values of Agile. Do it in vertical slices, because that's going to happen. What you want to bite off is a realistic, meaningful chunk of valuable change focused on the end customer, and then we've got half a chance of changing organizational culture with the Agile values. Good news is that a strong corporate culture of any type, but certainly based around Agile, is going to give us, you know, a very significant boost in corporate performance. This is from the author of The Culture Cycle, James Heskett. And this also, you know, sort of backs up what we were talking about earlier from the State of Agile report. Yeah. Just to remind ourselves, again, we looked at this in one of the earlier webinars, which one escapes me, so I'm not planning to go through it in detail. But just to remind ourselves, because business culture is so important, it's about moving from a command and control culture into a collaborative, cultivating and competence culture. So when we're thinking about culture change, it's really moving away from command and control. So we need to think about how to do that. A key thing to remember when we're talking about people is this, something I've learned over the years. Probably the major reason people resist change is because they're focusing on what they have to give up. Oh, this is going to change, therefore I need to give up these things, and that's going to change, therefore I need to give up these things. Now, what are we going to gain? So just to reiterate what I was saying earlier, we need to continually communicate the positive results the change that we're doing. What are the positive results? What are people going to gain from doing this? Yeah, will there be negatives? Probably, yes. Will we have to change the way we work now? Definitely. But focus on the gains. So it's key to have a really great communication approach based on the stakeholders. This is the Agile iceberg, again, which I've talked about in more detail earlier on. I'm just going to mention it quickly again. We need to make sure that we don't only change the easy stuff, the visible formal system, but we need to make sure we change the invisible informal system, the culture, the taboos, behaviors, stereotypes, language, that sort of stuff. If we don't change that, the risk is you will change the top of the iceberg, the thing that everybody can see. You won't change the bottom of the iceberg, and basically the top of the iceberg will just sink. Now, what's the best way to make this happen? Work in small, iterative, incremental chunks of value focused on the customer, vertical slices, and always concentrate on communicating down from the top to the bottom what the benefits are. So we are always focusing on, what are we going to gain? We're always focusing on what we're going to gain, and therefore you will pull the bottom along with you. So in essence, remembering Kotter's 8th step in the change process, we're going to anchor the change in the culture via communication of those key benefits and those key gains. So it's absolutely essential to do that. That's the only way, in my experience, you're going to pull the bottom of the iceberg along. It's absolutely essential we do that. So let's move into key lessons learned. I've shaped these, no great surprise here, I've shaped these into 4 values and 12 principles. I'm sure we all recognise where that comes from, the 4 values and 12 principles of the Agile Manifesto. So this is really my view on what these are. Yes. So if you've got any feedback, if you want to email me at a later point and give me your view, that would be absolutely awesome. But for now, number 1, transformation values. Evolution over revolution. We don't want to do big bang change. Revolutionary big bang change is extremely high risk. You might have to do it under certain circumstances, but they should really be edge cases. What we want to do is an agile transformation to get us to the point that we can continuously evolve. So I value evolution over revolution. I value systems thinking over silo mentality. Within a business or old school traditional businesses, quite typically you have lots of different business silos, none of which are actually focused on the customer. They're all focused on producing a component of what is required for the customer. Well, I really want to focus on systems thinking. How do we make sure that we identify the value chains and we create teams that can produce the features that are aligned onto the actual real customer, what the customer wants? So when I'm going to be doing a transformation, I'm always thinking about systems thinking over silo mentality as a key value. Another key value, we need both transformation leadership and transactional management. Transactional management is what enables the business to run. So the people who are on a day-to-day basis managing team X, Y, Z, etc. Obviously, that management style should be agile in a business agility model. However, for a transformation, we need transactional leaders or transformation leaders, people who can lead. So yes, I value transformation leadership over transactional management for the transformation. And then the last key value I've got is empowered people over processes and tools. So we need to make sure that the people in the teams and the people in the business are empowered to make them change themselves, rather than trying to force change on people. They change themselves and they can see the factual information to help them make the decision, about whether they should change and how they should change. So those are the 4 values I've learned over the last 26 years or so, excuse me. So hopefully some of those resonate with some of you. Let's have a look at the 12, I wouldn't call them principles, but really 12 things that I've learned over the years. There's our normal agile iterative cycle, based on the OODA loop. So we need to keep it iterative. We need to make sure flow. Yes, if you understand more, if you want to understand more about flow systems, have a look at one of the agile frameworks called actually Kanban isn't an agile framework, but have a look at Kanban. That will help you think about flow thinking. But that's absolutely key. So number 1 key thing I've learned is continuous value of independent, maximum valuable business flows. We should really be focusing on that, as I've been suggesting, systems thinking, all that sort of stuff. As we do that, continuous delivery of independent, maximum valuable business flows, we evolve our transformational strategy. So as Kotter suggests, step 2, we need a vision and a strategy, but the key thing is that evolves over time. And we also need to make sure that it runs at a sustainable pace. If it's not running at a sustainable pace, we're going to have that crashing change wave. So, we need to have the empowerment from the senior management in the organization that, hey, look, what's likely to happen here is we'll start doing this agile transformation and everyone will go, oh yeah, fantastic, we've all got to do it now. Well, we need to have the buy-in that doesn't happen. We need to have the buy-in to stop things firing off left, right, and centre. We want viral change, but we want it done in a way that is manageable, realistic, and we can actually make sure the transformation sticks. And then a last point, which actually comes from Kanban again: stop starting, start finishing. It is so easy within any transformation to fire 8 million things up at the same time. The 96 things from British Airways I suggested from 30 years ago. We really don't want to do that. What we really want to do is start something that gives a significant benefit, finish it, then start something else, then finish it, then start something else, then finish it. The more we have running at the same time, the more likely we are to confuse people, and the more we're likely to have huge amounts of noise, and once again, you'll create a crashing change wave. So stop starting things, start finishing things. Next one I've learned relates to empowerment. So it's rather than just saying, well, let's empower everybody. It's the appropriate power to the appropriate people. So obviously the implication there is we need to understand who the stakeholders are. I'll come on to that in a minute. Understand who the stakeholders are, and agree with them what power works for them and why they need it. A common fallacy with empowerment is that the management empower the teams. That's not the case. The teams empower themselves. So it's really the negotiation about what would make sense from an empowerment perspective, and what's really going to work. So we need to be thinking about the appropriate power to the appropriate people. Values-based management. We want the clear values, direction of travel. What are the clear values in our business agility direction? And something I'd suggest you have a look at, Dan Pink, autonomy, mastery, purpose. So we want to be thinking about when people are empowered, the teams need to be autonomous to do what they think makes sense. They need to be given enough time to master whatever it is they're trying to do. And obviously everybody needs to understand what the clear purpose is. Why are we doing this? So that's the second key thing I've learned: appropriate power to the appropriate people. This is key. This is absolutely key. We need to think about, that there's no point casting seeds of change onto an organization that's not ready for the seeds of change because, it's got change fatigue, or there's the feeling in the organization is that change never works, or whatever it is. The biggest thing that will not cause the seeds to seed, if that's English, is that people don't understand why we're doing this. You're just casting seeds of change onto an organization that thinks what it's doing now is fantastic, and it doesn't see the reason for the change. So communication cubed. What I mean by that is it's essential to listen to the organization and change direction based on what the organization is telling us. We need to be persuading, not demanding. Persuading. We've got to have fast feedback. If there is one sort of delivery, thinking about evolving products or whatever it is, if there is one sort of delivery that you've got to have fast feedback on, it's transformational change. You've got to understand what's going on in the business. You've got to understand what the implications are. So work small, iterative, incremental, get that fast feedback, communicate. Create a transformation pull environment. What I mean by that is basically, in the perfect world, we don't really want to be driving change into the organization. What we want to do is create an environment where it's ready for the seeds of change. So in other words, people can see a problem. What we then do is we plant the seeds of change that solves that problem. So in other words, we create a transformational pull environment. We don't really want to push change into the organization, or sometimes you have to, but we don't really want to push change. What we want to do is create an environment where people pull the change. They pull the change into the business. Yeah. Next one. So I've got a few of these, so I'll just speed up a little bit. Stakeholders. So we can see they're obviously a key stakeholder for a child monkey is the parent monkey, and the visualization. So we need to collaborate with stakeholders. So probably the key thing there is understanding who the stakeholders are. So the way RADTAC defines a stakeholder is the people or groups who can help us or screw us up. The people or groups who can help us or screw us up. And I might do a future webinar actually specifically on stakeholders and stakeholder management and interaction and communication, because it is such a key area. But we've got to understand who these people are, and then we've got to put in place a communication strategy around those different stakeholders. So we need to implement a targeted visual. We want things to be very, very visual so people can understand it easily, and targeted visual and fact-based persuasion campaign that's continuous and evolving based on the feedback. So collaborate with the stakeholders, think about the effective communication to consistently make sure that what we're doing resonates. Yeah, creative, innovative thinking, learning, fail fast, succeed faster. You know, this is something that just about every successful business person I've ever read about, I think, makes this point: fail fast, succeed later. Innovation and creativity, creating new things, is about failing, but it's about failing fast so you can learn. It's about failing, you know, in a way that's not fatal. If you're trying to do a big bang transformation and you fail, it's probably fatal. So we don't want to do it in small iterative chunks. So build an innovative, you know, things are going to be wrong, lean startup, build an innovative learning culture. What we want is lifetime learning. So we look for what are called lifetime learners to help us drive this sort of stuff forward. Design thinking, as we've said, continuously inspect and adapt, and making mistakes is related to innovation and creativity. Next key thing I've learned, so we've got 12 of these, as I was saying, just to align into the sort of like the agile principles. Encourage and visually support transformational leadership. So, you know, the key understanding here is really we want to deliver agile with agile. So therefore we need people who are minded to work in an agile way. So in other words, they're not doing agile, they're being agile, the way they actually interact with everybody. And, you know, in the transformation approach, we want to encourage and visibly support those transformational leaders. Next point, some of you may recognize that dude, that's Darwin. Some of you may recognize this dude, that's Gandhi. So I would suggest what these are called are tempered radicals or non-conformist thinkers, transformation catalysts. We want people in the organization, definitely people in our transformation team, who think differently. You know, in a traditional organization, these people might be seen as a bit of a pain in the arse. You know, they're saying things that doesn't resonate with the way we work, and, you know, how dare they say things that's different to everybody, the way everybody else thinks. But these people are so important for transformation. So we need to be finding a way to identify these people, and then we need to be finding a way that the organization listens to these people, and, you know, we push forward in this way. So this is going to be about incubating agile leaders and incubating agile teams. The next thing, yeah, we need to think about how we're going to plan the transformation, how we're going to go forward. So really the key thing I've learned there is this: to understand plans are worthless, but planning is everything. Now this quote is attributed to lots of different people. Eisenhower is one of them. And the point Eisenhower is making is that if you go into a theatre of war, for example, the one thing which becomes meaningless pretty instantaneously is the plans you put in place. But going through that process of thinking about, you know, what's likely to happen, what are we going to do, that's really essential. So we need to create transformation waves, but we also need to recognize that, you know, what we put in place is going to change pretty quick. And what we need to do is follow an idea, or my opinion is we should follow an idea of what's called tipping point transformation. So we've got fast feedback cycles, and we're planning at what point does this part of the business tip over into business agility, or at what point does the majority of the whole business tip over into business agility. So tipping point transformation. We're always doing small incremental changes to get to that tipping point. Next one, embrace simplicity and trust people. I love this quote from D Hoc. D Hoc being the ex-CEO of Visa. Yes, the person who sort of like came up with the idea for Visa, grew it, and etc. So, you know, he knows what he's talking about. Simple, clear purpose and principles give rise to complex and intelligent behavior. Complex rules and regulations give rise to simple and stupid behavior. So in business agility, we need to bear this in mind, but definitely in our transformation, we don't want to confuse the hell out of everybody, and we need to keep it as simple as possible. I'll speed up a bit just as we're coming up to the end of time. Yeah, anchor evolutionary change in the culture. So we need, whatever we do, we've got to make sure that our communication approach and everything else is anchoring the change in the bottom of the iceberg. So this is really a key learning for me, because, you know, I have made the mistake of trying to create transformational change and not anchoring it, and it'll work successfully for 6 or 9 months, and then sadly it'll just fall over in a big heap. Avoid cultural entropy. What I mean by that is, don't spend all the time and effort moving a new direction, creating a new direction of travel, and then over time it just falls backwards. So, you know, it just, yeah. So we need to make sure that we anchor that change. So we're nearly at the end now. Yeah, the next one is about aligning reward systems. Obviously, everything we've talked about up to now. So key things I've learned up to point 10. Well, human beings like reward. So we need to make sure that we align the reward systems with the sorts of stuff we've just been talking about there. So we need to reinforce the good habits. Yes. And we need to reduce the bad habits. So that's about thinking about reward systems. Now, you know, we're going to have a lot of team-based reward systems in business agility, but there should also be personal reward systems as well. But just be careful how you do that. And then the last thing to mention really on the key learning points, and I talked about this a lot when I was talking about measurement in Business Agility 11 webinar, I think it was. At the minimum, measure value, speed, satisfaction, and quality. So that's the basic stuff you would measure. And it's the basic stuff we want to be communicating back to the business to say, look, our transformation is achieving this. It has taken us from this point to that point. The basics being value, speed, satisfaction, and quality. So those are really the key things I've learned. This is the key thing I've learned over the last 26 years. Everything I've been talking about there is agile thinking. So my experience is so all the transformations I've run in RadTac and labeled in RadTac as we've grown globally, and all the transformations I've seen in all the other organizations I've worked in, we need to be using agile thinking. Big bang thinking doesn't work. Big bang thinking doesn't work when you're talking about business transformational stuff. So everything I've been talking about here, and lots of stuff we've been talking about over the other 11 webinars, that's the sort of things we need to apply into any transformation. And then I suppose the key thing is don't ever give up. I mean, apart from anything else, you can't fail if you don't give up. So transformation can be easy, but generally it's not. Don't ever give up. Yeah, final thought, just from two people I certainly respect. Martin Luther King: you can't fly, then run. You can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But by all means, keep moving. So things are going to be difficult. We need to drive forward. And, something from Churchill here. So then this is definitely my experience in business and anything else really over my career. Success, whatever that means, consists of going from failure to failure without loss of enthusiasm. If you don't try things out, you will never know whether something is better or worse than what we do now. So work in small increments, iteratively, based on feedback. So, it certainly aligns with my thinking. So that really brings us to the end of everything I'd like to talk about here. Obviously, we've just skimmed the surface of a very, very complex subject there, but hopefully that's given you a bit of benefit, a few ideas perhaps. Just talk about RadTac. Yes, what we do is we provide learning and development. We're probably the biggest company in the world that specialises in agile in learning and development. Help very large organisations of hundreds of thousands of people and small. Consultancy and coaching, help people actually do this. And then a big part of our business is exemplar practitioners. So providing organisations with Scrum Masters or product owners or agile architects or whatever it is they provide. So the difference here is consultancy and coaching is helping the organisation transform. Example practitioners are people who actually do it. So they're examples of people working there. Training portfolio. We've got a huge portfolio of agile training. We train in everything agile. As I say, probably the biggest in the world. We're around the world in all sorts of different areas around the world, Asia, the States, etc., etc. So we're all around the world. So thank you very much for coming along. That's really the finish of this webinar. I'll do another webinar somewhere between the next 2 to 4 weeks. If you have any ideas for a webinar, by the way, you'd like me to look at, please contact me, and I'll be more than happy to have a look at that.